The reading is from Psalm 142. Now, when I was asked to do the psalm, I think it was on Wednesday, I thought we might do it responsively. And then I realised you were being saved by the fact the computer is down. So you can't have the words up there, so you've got to listen to me. It's not an easy one to read, this one. At least I don't think it is. Because I'm not sure if David is appealing to God or in fact imploring God or commanding God. There is part of it where he just says, listen. He doesn't say, please listen, or anything else. He is demanding of God. We have the right. We can do that. And God will still listen. Now, David wrote this whilst he was hiding in a cave. The title of this in the NIV is a masket. I think that's how that is pronounced, maskil. And Val may be able to tell me what that word actually means. No, she's not listening. So, the Song of David when he was in a cave, a prayer. I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him I tell my trouble. When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. In the path where I walk, people have hidden a snare for me. Look and see, there is no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. I cry to you, Lord. I say you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Listen to my cry, for I am desperate in need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me. Set me free from my prison, that I may praise your name. Then the righteousness will gather about me because of your goodness to me. May we give thanks for this reading from his word.
I got asked how I was going to weave that into the Christmas message, but I'm not really. David wrote that psalm, or sang that psalm to the Lord in extreme loneliness as he was getting chased by King Saul because he'd been anointed to become the next king of Israel. In both Matthew and Luke, we read about the greatest gift ever given on Christmas Day, the birth of Jesus. Can you imagine how it would be if you woke up Christmas Day and had no one? No presents, or no person to wish you a Merry Christmas, or no one say Happy Christmas to you. As you can see in the messenger, today's talk is about loneliness. Mother Teresa visited Sydney in 1970 and said, the world's greatest tragedy is unwantedness, and the world's greatest disease is loneliness. What a statement. I remember, and you can still see it on there, that the ABC on their news bulletin semi-mocked Mother Teresa. Today, that same statement is still true as she spoke those words 50 years ago. In culture at the time, many hundreds of singers were singing about loneliness. Many hits were from Elvis, Roy Orbison, the Platters, Cliff Richard, and many more like the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel, just to name a few, had many popular songs about loneliness. And a friend of mine's here today, Linda. We call each other brother and sister. So I'm going to have to mention a little bit about one of the singers she doesn't like, Neil Diamond. Neil, after he, and I've spoken a little bit about this before, after he'd had his biggest hit ever and he was just feeling emptiness deep inside, his last words in that song were, "I feel lonely still." And that's how he finishes the song. All he had left that the world offered couldn't fulfill it. On Monday night, Lena and I were sitting listening to Christmas carols as they came through on YouTube and watching them. And Bing Crosby's White Christmas came on. That was the most successful song until Princess Diana passed away and Elton John's Candle in the Wind remake Goodbye England Rose overtook it, but now it's the most sold record in a vinyl format or in a CD sold. Irving Berlin, who wrote White Christmas, and he wrote it for a musical called Holiday Inn, wrote the song out of a position of sadness and loneliness. There's a spoken part to White Christmas that no one ever listens to, or you rarely ever hear. And it goes like this. The sun is shining, the grass is green, the orange and palm trees sway. There's never been such a day in Beverly Hills, LA, but it's December 24th. I am lonely and longing to be up north. He then goes on to start singing, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. Philip Zimbardo, the head professor at Stanford University and the head professor at Westport Military Academy in America, the psychologist, wrote in Psychology Today, "There's no more destructive influence on physical and mental health than isolation of you from me and us from them." He points out to the studies that show loneliness as a central agent of depression, paranoia, schizophrenia, rape, suicide, mass murder, and many other diseases. He passed away just a few weeks ago, but he spent a lifetime studying the effects of loneliness. Loneliness in the community has the same effect on a person's health as smoking 11 cigarettes a day or drinking 5 standard drinks of alcohol. Lonely people then turn to cigarettes and alcohol for help and compound the problem. AA, in over the last 20 annual reports, have said loneliness is the greatest contributor of people seeking help when they dig down on why they're at AA. Russell Brand, the English comedian actor, a few years ago in an article said, "Drugs and alcohol are not my problem. The reality of life and loneliness is my problem. Drugs and alcohol are my solution." Today I'm happy to say that Russell has actually turned to the Lord, totally a teetotaler, and in a ceremony in London, Bear Grylls baptised him in April this year. Loneliness is a strange subject. Loneliness is not solitude or being alone. You can be lonesome but not lonely. But more and more people you find are lonely in a crowd. David Jeremiah sums it up best trying to define loneliness in his book, What is Loneliness? "I don't know how to define it," he writes. "All I can describe it, it's an underlying anxiety of having no one close, a sharp aching, a moment of grief, an empty feeling in the pit of the stomach, and when we know that we have no one who we can turn to or trust." So then loneliness is not isolation but insulation. The feeling of being cut off, the feeling of unnoticed, unloved, uncared, unneeded, or even unnecessary. What brought me to this topic was seeing the people that come through the food program on a Friday and the loneliness there. Loneliness is a state of sadness that comes from feeling alone, cut off from others. A person can feel a lack of connection with others, even if they're in their presence. Everyone has 3 base basic psychological needs. Everybody needs someone to love and to share intimately with. Everybody needs someone who can understand, to know how they feel and say, yes, I understand and I care. And everybody needs to be needed and wanted. So what does loneliness have to do with Christmas? Well, just up the hill at Pilotti College on Christmas Day, there'll be 80 people there for lunch, and they have no one else to have Christmas with, which is really sad. Lena, Dad and myself, we went to St Christopher's in Sindel last year, where over 120 community members attended a lunch in the parish hall, and they were just community members that were lonely and needed somewhere to have lunch and to be with someone. See, Christmas for many is a very lonely time. Statistics tell us that in the 12 days of Christmas, from December 21st to the 3rd of January, for our police force and our first responders, it's the highest period of suicide, murder, assaults and domestic violence. So what's God's answer to loneliness? In the Bible reading, you heard David cry out, being lonely. He also wrote in Psalm 139 verses 7 and 8 says, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there." The Old Testament or Hebrew word for lonely is shamim. I think I've got that right, Val. But which means to be desolate. The New Testament or Greek word is aromas, which means in a desert place. So what are the causes of loneliness? The greatest cause of loneliness is rejection. Some have tried to have friends and they've been rejected. Maybe they're burned in a love or a personal relationship. Mark Twain summed it up beautifully. He says, if a cat sits on a hot stove, he'll never sit on a hot stove again. He'll never sit on any stove again. He may not get burnt a second time, but he's never going to take a chance. And many people, like that cat, don't go back again after you've been burnt and because you fear rejection, because of your rejection. The next cause is insecurity. So many have the basic sense of insecurity. They don't see themselves worthy of being accepted or worthy of having a friend. They don't accept themselves, so they don't believe others can accept them. So rather than building bridges subconsciously, they just build walls up around them and close themselves in. Perspective. Some have gone through, that's another reason, of the four main reasons. Some have gone through deep sorrow, deep tragedy, deep loss, and they lose their sense of perspective. They get to feel like no one cares, nobody understands, and nothing makes sense. When I was studying this, I read Job chapter 19. And if you read Job chapter 19, you see a man full of despair, loss of perspective, and so lonely in this world, but he still has the Lord as a friend. Selfishness is another reason. Someone said there's no life so empty as a self-centred life, that there is no life so centred as self-empty life. Jesus, when questioned by the Pharisees about the commandments in Matthew 22, said, "Thou shalt love," and this is about which is the greatest commandment, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. So do not be selfish, but find love for yourself and others. People turn inwards on themselves, and it's like a form of sin, and it separates, isolates, and brings death to relationship. So what steps do we need to take to conquer loneliness? 1 Peter 5:7 says, leave all your worries with him because he cares for you. The last words of Matthew's Gospel say, I will be with you always to the end of the age. God is always with you. The answer is in 5 looking ideas. Look up, look behind, look at, looking to others, and looking around. See, David in the Bible reading knew who to turn to. The best place is to start by looking up, developing a relationship with God. When you strengthen your walk with the Lord, you always know that you have one person, your Creator, with you. This morning, and my mornings always consist of open the Bible up at breakfast first, and listen to the devotion of the day. And then I go to the ABC news site. Today's Triple J podcast was a very interesting one. And it was entitled, Why Are Young Men Turning to Christianity? And the Triple J reporter went off an Australian survey that's happened, which says that 37% of men rate God as important or very important, but only 17% of women in the this is in Gen Z, which is all the 18s to 16 to about 25-year-olds. And the bloke person that they interviewed, his final bit about where he'd had everything in life, but he felt empty, so he turned to God, said, I no longer have loneliness. And that was his final statement. So he looked up and found God. Look behind is about reflection on yourself. In the past, when you had feelings of loneliness, what have you told yourself? One of the ideas when you do some of the self-help or the help courses I've done over the years, they get you to get a piece of paper and write on it 10 times or 10 different phrases. And for loneliness is, I am lonely because, and then you've got to put down your reasons. One of the interesting things out of that is that people, when they write that down, find out that they've placed unrealistic expectations on themselves. They focus on their weaknesses, not their strengths. And by focusing on that, they exclude all their strengths out of their life. And if you do it, you may not even be aware of what God says about your significance, value and worth in Christ. It is possible for these to have been merely excuses to keep you from trusting God, facing your fears and risking growth. Those that have done EFC or Empowered Faith Community training will, if they've been and done it, they will see that they do strength posters. So people, those lonely people, can focus on their strengths and not their weaknesses. Another thing is looking up at. And looking at is about how to communicate with others. Quality communication takes time. Is intentionally take time with significant people in our lives. Quality communications involves more than words. Albert Meribin researched it, and words only for how you communicate. Words are only 7% of what you say. The other 93% involves other factors like tone of voice, it's 38%, body posture, gestures, eye contact. They make up the other 55%. When one of these components contradicts the other, that's where you get a mixed message. Quality communication involves listening. We read in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It's another favourite bit of mine because it starts off in verse 1. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. When we get to verse 7 it reads, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. Then in Proverbs 18 we read, the words of a whisperer are like a delicious morsel. Quality communication involves small talk. It's a known fact that in small talk that with someone, it's when you get to know that person best. The other looking was looking around, or looking to others, I should say. That's about developing relationships with others. Isn't it? I read in research that one person said how to develop Christian friendships is arrive at church 15 minutes before church and then don't leave until 15 minutes after. In Exodus 33:11, it says that friends speak face to face. It says, thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks with his friends. Someone once said the best way to have a friend is to be a friend. Proverbs 18:24 sums it up as well. A man who has friends must himself first be friendly. The other is looking around, and what are some of the creative options for dealing with your loneliness? What has worked for others? Talk to someone who has overcome loneliness. Find out what has worked for them. David in his Psalms has the ideas. In Psalm 145 verse 18 we read, the Lord is close to all that call on him. Then in verse 20 we read, the Lord protects all those who love him. There's many, many examples in Psalms, and I'll quote just one more. And that is from Psalm 34 verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. Is there anything you could do to reach out to help others this time? We could also expand your areas of interest, embrace creativity, and find a like-minded community. In Philippians chapter 1, and Paul's writing in Philippians from one of the loneliest places on earth, and that's in prison. And I'll finish with some of Paul's wisdom. I thank God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you, all making my prayer with joy, because of your partnership with the gospel from the first day until now. And I'm sure of this, that who began the good work in you will bring it to completion in the day of Jesus Christ. It is right for me to feel this way about you all, because I hold you in my heart. For you are partakers with me in grace, both in my imprisonment and the defence and the confirmation of the gospel. For God is my witness, and how I yearn for you all with my affection for Jesus. My affection, I should say, of Jesus. This is my prayer, that your love may abound in you more, with knowledge and discernment. See, Paul had the first dot point completely right. Instead of being lonely in prison, through his personal relationship with Jesus, he wrote many a beautiful letter. So this Christmas, don't just celebrate the birth of Jesus, but also celebrate your personal relationship with Jesus. And as we celebrate his birth, do not be lonely, but ensure your relationship with Jesus is very personal, and please share it with others.